Now, our next presentation to wrap up the day is Paul McDonald from Google Consumer Surveys. Some of you may have heard of this company, kind of a small startup. And we're going to break a little bit of the rules here in the interest of public interest. Paul is actually going to be demoing the platform and particularly previewing Google's new mobile survey application. So normally that's not what we would let any presenter do. But the thinking here was that people would be pretty damn interested in what Google was doing in this space. So Paul's going to get set up.
Excellent. Can you hear me? Okay, great. Let me set up my computer real quick, and then I'll get started. So again, my name is Paul. I'm a product manager at Google. I've been at Google almost 10 years, worked on a lot of different things. For the past 3 years, I led the Gmail team, so both product strategy, design, as well as a team of 300 engineers. And at heart, I'm an engineer. I'm a product person. I'm not a market researcher. But I think that's actually good because we kind of look at things from a little different angle, and I hope through this presentation you'll be able to see sort of where we come from. I'm going to talk about two things, two sort of themes. One is, and they're both sort of maxims that Google uses for all of our products. The first is, focus on the user and everything else will follow. And the second one is, speed is the most important feature of any product. So through a series of slides, I'll explore both of those areas. And then in the end, we'll show a little demo or some screenshots of our new mobile platform. But first, I should explain that title slide. You see, at Google, we have a group of people who are solely dedicated to building this application, which allows us to create these internet memes. You basically upload a picture, you put some text on it, and it's kind of like a social commentary on what's going on at Google or in the world. So you'll see most of the time, they're just a joke. So Kiana's like, whoa. Often they're social commentary. So these kind of come with a title. So first world problems. These are problems that people who have food and shelter and water don't have to worry about. So they come up with these crazy problems. Or hipsters. These, the people who are too cool. Whenever anyone else likes what they're doing, they get upset. Or they're not the typical person. And sometimes these things are just weird. Like Steve Buscemi eyes. I have no idea what this means. It freaks me out every time I look at this picture. But this is what we do at Google, because we have resources and extra time, apparently. The thing is, they all have a little nugget of truth to them. A little, again, most of this is kind of social commentary. And so I go back to the slide, and I sort of think, whether or not we intended or not, the research industry sort of thinks as respondents as this guy. Just kind of someone who they can task with completing a survey, whether that's a 120-page, 2-hour survey, which I actually have on my desk from a leading CPG company, or it's crazy question types like 50 variable grids that you have to fill out. And these guys, the survey respondents are like, why you not like me? Why are you giving me this crap? And so if you focus on the respondent, I think you end up with a different type of product, and that's what I wanted to discuss today. So the first question is, well, why should you put respondents first in the first place? We need to get, as researchers, we need to get our job done. We need the data that we want. And the thing there is there's a lot of data supporting this fact that if you make the respondent experience good, you end up with better research. So for example, the longer the questionnaire, the lower the response rate and the more non-response bias. Long questionnaires also tend to reduce response quality and increase straight-liners. Lots of research around this area. Certain types of questions like grids introduce measurement error. They're more difficult to do, and because they're more difficult, people don't spend a lot of time on them. And users are being inundated with survey solicitations. Whether that's after you purchase something at an online store and you get a survey, or you're constantly being requested to join a panel. This has a net negative experience for the respondent on our industry. And I think in the long run, we're going to end up with lower quality survey data and really people who are sort of professional survey respondents. And I don't think that's what we really want. If we look at the data from our own platform, Google Consumer Surveys, we see the same thing. So we've served over 500 million surveys, survey impressions, since we started only 2 months ago. And this is some of the data from what we have. So we've experimented with more than one question at a time. And you can see the response rates just drop off. Response rates by number of answer options. So if you have 2 options, people kind of think it's spammy for whatever reason, the way that we display it. 3 is the best, and then as you add more, the response rates drop down. Even the question types matter a lot. So multiple choice questions are easy. This is response time, by the way. So they're done quicker. Ranking, Likert scales are a little more difficult. Open-ended responses are hard for respondents. They take a lot of time to do. So we sort of took another look at this from a different angle. And we wanted to understand, what if we focused on the respondent first? What would this whole experience look like? And this is kind of what we came up with. So this is what I'm going to demo a little bit. So if you focus on the respondent, and you know that the number of questions reduces the response rate, the types of questions reduces the response rate, or the response time, or increases the response time, then you build a product to maximize getting the user through the experience. And this is kind of what we came up with. So if we could go to the computer. This is one of the publishers in our publisher network. We have hundreds of publishers. But what we do is we offer the user the ability to trade their time for access to content on a site. Lima, Ohio, I picked this because it's local, or is it Lima? I'm not quite sure. I always get that wrong. So what you can see here is we give the user a taste of the article. And then we have our survey prompt. So you can either answer the question, or you can sign into the site. And you see below that, there's kind of gray lines of text. You can't read anything there. Even if you try to copy and paste, it's just kind of blank lines. So as a user, I can answer the survey. And in fact, this is a survey that we ran earlier for some of the Procter & Gamble folks. So do I regularly compost food waste at home? I don't. Why don't I regularly compost food waste? Because it's too much work for me. So there it is. In less than 10 seconds, I've answered a 2-question survey. I've gotten access to the content. It was a really great experience for me because I didn't have to pay money to access this content where I normally would have. So that's kind of where we were going with the respondent experience. Now that leads to some interesting things on the researcher experience. And particularly when we focused on researchers, we had to put some limitations on what they did. So there's a character limit count on the question length. The number of responses is limited. The question types are limited. But in the end, they end up with much better data. And you can read our white paper on validation. But we have a very high quality data, and we get a representative sample of the US population. The other thing we focused on with researchers was speed. Speed in the application, speed in the processing of the data. So right when you submit a survey, you get answers back. And you get answers back within 24 hours. And it's not just sort of regular old answers. We do some interesting things. So for each response, we have inferred age and gender of the respondent based on their browsing behavior. We know their location from their IP address. And we can do lots of things to sort of segment this data. This is a question which is one of the first examples of our new format that we're releasing today, which is an open-ended numeric question. You can ask someone to type in any number that you want. So in this case, what age is it acceptable for a child to own a mobile phone? People could type in whatever they want. The mean ends up being around the age of 14, which I kind of agree with. I have 2 small children. But then if I wanted to see something like what males who were 25 to 34 in urban areas who are low income thought, I can do that. And I can do that very quickly. And so speed is really sort of the utmost thing we focus on in the research experience, allowing you to do things very quickly without having to calculate the margin of error or the confidence intervals for you. And then we can also look at sort of some response metrics about this particular question, our bias that we had when we served it. So you can see we kind of oversampled the Midwest in this case. But these are the types of things that we focus on at Google. Okay, back to the slides. Sorry, that was just a quick demo. We also focus on speed on our own team. So we're one of the few teams at Google that kind of control our own destiny. It's what we call an autonomous unit or a startup within Google. We have the ability to release code whenever we want and do partnerships and projects with any other company. This is a graph of the number of days that a particular release was in production. So the bigger the spike, the longer it was. And on average, we release to production 8 times a day. And what does that mean? All it really means is whenever we have an issue from a customer, they want to do something new, or there's a bug, or we want to try something new, we just push it to production and it's live. Literally in less than a day, we can do complicated features, which I think is kind of interesting because it means that we're just getting started, and we'll have, because we can push things so often and we can respond to customers, we'll have a much more interesting platform in just a few months. Okay, so if you believe the premise that you should focus on the respondent experience, then what does that mean in a mobile world? Well, as everyone has told you today, the mobile has come. It's not that it's coming, it's come. More smartphones than PCs shipped in 2011. In 2 years, more people will be surfing the internet on mobile phones than PCs, which is just crazy. It's a completely different form factor, and it deserves a different look in terms of what you do on it. In 2012, we'll do 400 million Android activations. These are new Android phones that are being activated. And it's almost up to about 1 million a day at this point, which is crazy. I mean, it's faster than anything that has ever, any device that has ever been on the planet thus far. So it's really exciting for us because we have this platform that we can use. But it also is scary because people are using these phones in ways we didn't expect, we didn't know about. The thing with market research on mobile phones, a lot of times we kind of offer the same old experience. These long form surveys, poor formatting, really no motivation to complete the survey. There's no context around it. And I think this is the part that has to change if we really want to focus on mobile users. So let's start, again, thinking about the respondent experience. And the first question that would come up is, why would I ever want to answer a survey on a mobile phone? It just doesn't seem very interesting to me. And the answer here is, you answer a survey on a phone to get an app for free. Just like we're doing on publishers to be able to get access to content on the internet, you trade your time for something valuable to you. So you may think, well, I'm not going to sit and answer a 15-minute survey just to get an app, a 99-cent or $2 app that I could get anywhere else. Well, here's the thing. Because we have this Android platform and applications are loaded constantly on it, all we have to do is show one question from a survey at a time, every app load. And so all you're doing every single time that you are loading the app until you've reached the number of completed questions to enable you to kind of get the app for free, is you're answering one survey question. And then we can stitch that all together at a point later in time. So how does this all work? So the first thing is the user downloads an app from the App Store or Google Market or Google Play, I think it's called now, I'm not quite sure. And then we ask the user, you want this app as it is with ads? Do you want to upgrade? You can pay for it. Or do you want to get it for free by answering a series of questions? And if they say, yes, yeah, show me a couple questions. The first thing we do is we ask for their demographic data. This is a one-time thing. We ask for their age and gender. The only reason we do this on mobile phones is because On mobile phones, we don't really have the inferred demographic data for users, so we have to ask for it. And then the next time they load the app, they get a question. And you can see there's a little, it's kind of hard to see, but there's a little ticker at the bottom. However many questions that you've answered, it sort of adds up until you hit the max that you need, and you get the app for free, the upgraded app. Now, has anyone played Words with Friends, Zynga app? So on the free version, every time that you make a move, you have to watch an ad or see an ad, an interstitial between turns. Instead of doing that, you could answer a question. And after 10 of those, you get the upgraded app for free. So from the user's perspective, the value proposition is obvious. Of course I want to do this. And the questions are so easy. You know, the formats are so nice and clear that the only thing I have to do is sort of read it for 10 seconds and click one of the buttons. It's a perfect interface. And in fact, when you look at the question formats we have on the web, you can see how easily they translate to the mobile phone. And it's actually because we started thinking about the mobile phone first. That was our first thing. And so you can see this is kind of the perfect experience for a user. Then you keep answering these questions, only one per turn, until you've completed all of the questions, and you get the app for free. The crazy thing is we know way more about the user than just the answer to these questions, or even the demographics that they gave us. We know their locations, we know the apps they use, the transactions they've completed, the music they own, the books they've read, and it goes on and on and on. And so you can imagine a future where if you as a researcher want to target people who are shopping in a store, maybe say a Kroger or a Raley's, and you know that these users are answering survey questions every time they load an app. So maybe they're in their store using their barcoder app, and they load it up, and they get a survey question. Well, we know you're in a Raley's store, so all we have to do is send you the right survey question for that, a contextual survey question for that experience. So you could say, you know, what are you doing? What factor is driving your purchase in the store today? Or what are you buying? And these types of things can happen at very granular locations because we know through Google Maps and our geo infrastructure exactly where you are and what you're doing. So I wanted to leave you with that thought that mobile is really just the beginning, and because we've sort of designed our system from mobile up front, even though we launched on the web first, I think this will be the best user experience and will lead to the highest quality data. Thank you.
I expect to get a lot of questions from this. So jump up. Raise your hand.
I have a quick question on the stitching of data on the back end that you talked about.
Yeah.
Specifically in the scenario where you have to fragment the big survey into components of small ones.
Yeah.
Have you guys experimented with that stitching or data fusion part? You can talk about.
Yeah. So I think the interesting part with mobile is you have to do less of that because it's the same user answering all of the questions from your survey, but they're just doing it at a different period of time. Instead of all at once, they do it, you know, every time they load an app or every turn that they take in a game. And so in some cases, if you're playing Zynga Words with Friends, you may complete an entire survey in a session of a game, and you don't really have to stitch the data together. It's just one respondent answering all of those questions. On the web, as we do today, we only offer researchers the ability to ask a particular user one or two questions. But you can have more than 2 questions. You can have 50 questions if you want. And each of those questions have the same distribution of demographics. So you're sort of looking at the same profile of users for each question. And we sort of started to experiment with actually correlating responses from one question to another, doing crosstabs across questions, and doing some data fusion, data matching, statistical matching stuff that we've gotten some help from Stanford professors to do that. So that's coming along.
I have one, actually.
Yeah.
So how about the ability on the mobile device to go back to the same respondent over and over and over again to do more longitudinal research?
Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of the point, is that because the same user has to answer a certain number of questions to get an app, and they have motivation to do that, we can go back to the same user over and over for a given survey or multiple surveys from the same researcher.
So effectively, you now have the world's largest mobile panel.
You can, yes. I mean, you just said it. So, I'm not going to claim that
Treat
yet.
that I said it first. Okay, please,
Yeah.
Kim.
I'm going to ask a question and just be a little brazen in asking it. But,
Sure.
Are you doing any customizations?
Customizations of the interface?
In other
or the-
words, if someone were to come to you and say, we need X, Y, and Z, could you customize based on a specific need?
Yeah, I mean, that's what we do all day. So big clients come to us, they say, we need this. We think about it as a way to generalize a solution for all of our other researchers. And so we do, like we've done custom targeting, we've done Canada, for example, for some of our researchers. We've done trackers, we've done all kinds of different things. So yes.
Can you integrate in video and audio as well to do more of the ethnographic pieces?
Yeah, so that's really one area. So it's one area that we're not really approaching because we think the user, it takes more time for the user to watch or listen or do those sorts of things than we really want. And again, our focus is on the end user, the respondent, and not the researcher, unfortunately, in some cases. And so that's not our focus.
Okay. Done.
I found it very interesting when you talked about the different types of questions and how people responded.
Yeah.
The only thing I found that you may want to go back and take a look at is open ends are very hard when people have to type it all in.
Yeah.
But if you're doing a mobile app and you record it and you use voice recognition to decode it, I think the open ends become much more easier when people speak it as opposed to type it or enter there.
Yeah, I agree. And I think for a certain class of users, that's definitely the case. I think there are also problems with the speech-to-text algorithms that may introduce error in that as well. But that's something that we'd be exploring for sure.
Question, we heard earlier that there's obviously difficulties doing geolocating when you're inside a building. And I understand there's some work being done, I believe by Google, to actually map interiors of, so you look at Google Maps of the insides of buildings.
Yeah.
Would that potentially overcome that problem so you might actually know where in the building a person is and then deliver a contextual question to them?
Yeah, so in some cases, yes. So depending on the building structure, you can get a good GPS signal. Sometimes inside the building they have wireless routers in which you can get a location off of. And in general, yes, we are trying to map everywhere in the world. We're trying to organize all the world's information, and indoor maps is one of those things. Yeah. And so we do know, in some cases, the location of individuals within a given space, and down to, in some cases, it could be an aisle in a grocery store. So that's definitely a possibility.
No, you've placed a lot of, I think, appropriate priority on the user, on the respondent experience, and in the course of your discussion, I think it's pretty much fair that you've kind of said that shorter is always better, and that respondent's experience is therefore always about the smallest number of questions, the shortest involvement. What do you think about, we've heard at other times and some in other places as well, about gamification and the notion of research experiences, respondent experiences as being inherently pleasurable, which might then impact the importance of brevity. Do you guys have a point of view on that?
I mean, we haven't really experimented with gamification. In some sense, we kind of are because we are basically publicly posting these surveys on websites all over the world, and all over the U.S. for now, the world soon. And people choose to interact with them. People are either interested in answering them, or they see value in answering them because they get access to the content. But beyond that, we haven't really explored that space, and I can't say for sure, but it's not really one of our priorities.
Hi, 2 questions. Who's your customer? Is it us? Is it our customers? And I mean us by research people.
Yeah.
I mean, and please be as honest as possible instead of just saying you guys are important, because I mean, I really think it's awesome what you've done, but I really think you should tell us how you think we should play a role in this.
Yeah.
And two, is this just one more step to Google becoming a data wallet?
Okay, interesting questions. So our customers, going into this, market research was really not the goal at all. Like we really wanted to get, we wanted to have a way for users to access this content online because we thought that was valuable in itself. And paying for it really wasn't ideal. So we tried to find ways to get people to access that content. It turns out, though, that we have millions of advertisers that we work with and have relationships with. The majority of those are small and medium-sized businesses or local businesses. And those guys have really never had access to quality market research before. So what we've seen thus far is that those are the folks that are using it and are coming back and repeating, because they get real data. They get data that they couldn't really get before. And when you put the power of sample in their hands, they can do really interesting things. So I would say our main customers right now are small and medium-sized businesses. We do have Fortune 500 companies using it, and we work closely with those folks to sort of make sure that they understand how our system works. Because generally what happens with a big company is they'd send us an RFP. And they'd be like, we want to answer this question. And we have to say, I'm sorry, we don't do that. We're not researchers. We don't have the resources for that. I think you should work with a research agency to do something like that. And if you look at sort of the way that we've done these types of businesses at Google before with AdWords and analytics and Google Apps, really we focus on sort of the smaller customers. And we hope that agencies and firms add value on top of sort of the core things that we're providing. And in this case, I think it's the sample and sort of the tooling around it. So is this another step closer to a Google data wallet? I'm not sure how to answer that because I don't really know exactly what you mean by data wallet. Do you mean to use your data as a form of currency or Google just storing a bunch of data about you?
I trust putting my money and my information in my wallet, and then I use it to transact.
Yeah.
And you're sort of doing that with this. You're saying,
yeah,
give us some data, and we'll help you open a door that was otherwise a paid door. And
right,
with all the other data that you have, and you recently changed your privacy policies, and you did that awesome Good to Know campaign, which I thought was really good. I mean, you seem like you're sort of set up for that.
Yeah, I mean, data is valuable. I don't think there's any question to that. And how companies like Google use that data or empower users to use their own data for access to goods is, I think, to be seen. I think we've started down this route where you can trade your personal data for access. And that may or may not play out. I think we've hit upon something because the publishers are really interested, the users are happy, the folks who didn't have access to research now do and are pretty happy. So it's just, I think, a matter of time before users start to use their personal data as a form of currency in much the same way that we're doing here.
More questions? Yes, Bernie.
Hi, Paul. Thanks very much. Earlier this morning, we saw a presentation about emerging markets.
Yeah.
From the world of Google consumer surveys, can you give us some insight into how you see the world in emerging markets, where the technology in people's hands is different than we have it in ours?
So I think we take a little different look at that. What we see, at least on the Android platform, is that even in countries like Africa or sub-Saharan Africa, where access to smartphones may not seem to be really available, what we're seeing is that these folks, the next upgrade that they make is to a very cheap smartphone, a cheap Android phone. That costs them almost nothing, and they pay for the data plans. And so I actually think that 5 years from now, there aren't going to be feature phones around. They're going to be cheap smartphones. And you can do the same things that we're doing here on the expensive smartphones of today, which are going to be the cheap smartphones of tomorrow. So everything is sort of moving at a pace that is really hard to comprehend, I think. And when you look into the future, I think what you're going to see is people using a phone like you have in your pocket today in Africa and Indonesia and India, everywhere else.
So how's this playing into Google Glasses? You get all this built, and then you're going to shift and move to this other piece.
Well, if you've used Google Glasses, you know that it's not quite there yet. But it's actually really interesting. I think the mobile device is changing its form, the form factor. Whether it ends up being eyeglasses that look kind of strange or something else embedded in your clothing or a hat or something else, I don't know. But I think what's going to happen is that the form factor of your phone is not going to be the same in 10 years from now, for sure. And I don't know what that means for our product. I'm not sure what that means for market research, other than it's a really exciting time, and we see the improvements, the innovations every day.
More questions? Yes?
Whenever you download an app, you're given a screen that says what privacy or what information is sent to the manufacturer.
Yeah.
And how do you foresee dividing what information is sent to Google versus what information is sent to the manufacturer? Or will we only have access to that information that the consumer accepts to be sent to the manufacturer?
Yeah, so I guess you could think of an app developer or a manufacturer the same way we think of publishers today in our network. Publishers in our network don't get any of the data from users. The people who pay for the data get the data, and it's their data to use. And so I don't think the app developers will get any of this data. The user makes a choice up front whether or not they want to give you the survey data. They can always back out at any point. So I don't think there's a privacy issue there, because you're consenting to giving that data away as a user, and that's why we kind of feel pretty good about it. You know, it's a user choice, and we try not to do anything that really harms that experience.
Thanks. So a little more on data ownership. So
yeah.
in the example you gave before, we know that you do not compost.
Yes.
And so who owns that data? We know P&G owns rights to that data.
That's right. They do now.
Google owns rights to that data?
Google owns the data and licenses it to the people who purchase it.
And does Google also license the fact that, I don't know, you listen to Lady Gaga and watch cat videos on YouTube?
Do we license that, or do we own that data? Yes. So currently we own that data. And we don't do anything with that data today. I think mostly because it's kind of creepy if you start like targeting ads or doing something related to that data. And you know, that's, again, like we're trying to focus on the user and make it so that they want to do these things. It's unclear, I think, from a legal standpoint, who eventually ends up owning that data. And I think those types of fights will be fought in the public eye in the next couple months and years.
To follow up on that question,
yeah.
When you roll this out worldwide,
mm-hmm.
when you hit regulatory restrictions,
yeah.
for example, a given country or a given organization says you can't collect that, or at least give that information out for our citizens,
yeah.
What are you going to do there, or how are you going to face that?
So I think in general, Google tends to spend our legal resources in ways that we think benefit end users, not necessarily our company. You know, I think that there is a benefit for the user to give us their data in this case, and in other cases with ad targeting and otherwise, because we provide better ads, we provide more relevant surveys, we can provide free apps. So as much as we can, I think we're going to fight, but for the most part, you know, if there are issues that we can't overcome, then we just can't launch in that country, and that's an unfortunate fact, because we disservice those users.
We're going to continue the conversation during the activation session. I'm sure that some of these topics will come up, but Paul, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks. Appreciate it.